Okay, folks. Good afternoon. Once again, we're going to deal back into some of my earlier childhood stories. Tonight, at least one, maybe two, but for one for sure, I'm going to tell you about a time when I was growing up. This all took place from around 14 to about 16 and a half year old. Come to head around 16-year-old. I moved back into South Carolina, Easley, South Carolina, when I was around 14, on top of Mill Hill, Easley Mill Hill. And at that time, there was about 3 other young men on this Mill Hill that were about my age, around 14 to 15-year-old. And it just so happened the house we lived in was right on the very top of the hill. So when I went anywhere, walking that is, I had to come off that hill. And coming off that hill, I almost always had to pass 1 or 2 or 3 of these boys' houses. They lived farther down the hill, and I had to walk by their house going down the street. Headed to the woods, going squirrel hunting, going fishing, or whatever I was doing. And they come back in the afternoon, I'd have to walk right by their house again. Well, these kids wasn't what you would call really bad. It's just I was a stranger to the neighborhood, and I didn't fit in with the group. Seems like well, they had their things in life was they like to smoke cigarettes, they like to drink a lot of beer, they like to play a lot of cards, and cards I do like, but I suck at cards, so I didn't play cards, and I just didn't fit in with the group because I didn't want to do that, and I don't drink beer, I don't like it at all, so. They tried to be, I guess, friends to start with, but when I didn't come around, didn't want to join their crowd, bottom line, they decided they didn't like me. And if you don't like somebody, they didn't want me on the Mill Hill. So their goal was to run me off Mill Hill, or basically just whoop my butt. And so I would come around on the Mill Hill. But at that time, they was about a year my age or a year older than me at the most. But for Lord willing, I was just a lot stronger than a normal person. Way stronger than all of them combined. So anytime they actually got up the nerve to take me on, it didn't go out very good. Not for them anyway. So usually 2 or 3 would jump me. And when you got the second one down and you reached for the third one, he'd always pull his Hulk belt out. They carried Hulk belts. And they wouldn't come at you with a hot knife at first, but before they let you whip all 3 of them, they start pulling knives out. And then I didn't stick around because I didn't like knife fights. So it was either them attacking me or me whooping them, but just back and forth. It went on like this for a couple of years. And during this time, never was a final confirmation, I guess you'd say. But by the time I turned 16 and a half year old, there was some kids on the hill that were 3 or 4 years younger than me that run around with my younger brothers. And these were young boys that loved outdoors also. And I was always hunting. I loved to hunt. And so they had come up with the idea they wanted to build a fort down in the woods to camp out in. Well, that's great with me because that's where I stayed anyway. So for about 3 or 4 weeks there, all these young boys, my younger brothers, and me, we got together and anywhere we could find plywood or wood, we put it together and we built a little building down in the woods. And it was about probably 12 foot square, and the ceiling was about 7 foot high, and then we had a room above. It was probably only about 5 foot high, but we had a trap door, a ladder you walked up, and you opened the trap door up, and you walked over there. Well, you moved over there, you laid down on, we had a piece of carpet up there to lay on, and you could sleep. Boy, we thought we was the greatest thing in the world. We actually, somehow or another, we come up with a pot-belly stove. And so on a cold winter day, we would have that fire going, and boy, it'd get that place just hot as a firecracker. And we thought we was a cat's meow. Well, one year, like I said, if you see me in the woods, I've always had a rifle, shotgun, pistol. I was squirrel hunting, And these young kids, they would come down. They didn't have guns, but I would let them use mine while we were squirrel hunting. And that was my job to watch, make sure that they didn't get hurt. And basically back in, the biggest thing we hunted was squirrels. That's about all that was around in that area. But on this particular night, it was already late in the evening. We had this nice fort built. It was one of them winter days where it was sleet and ice, and it was cold, and just slush and ice all over the ground. And we'd been tromping all over the woods, and we killed, I think, 6 or 7 squirrels, and made a little stew that night. And it probably was half raw, but we ate it. We thought we was tough, so we ate it. It's got later in the evening, and some of the little boys were sitting around pop in the stove talking, and I went upstairs, lay down. It was probably about 10:30, 11 o'clock, and we didn't have no clock back then. But I'm just saying that's probably what it was. But one of the boys already up already sleeping, and we just had a big piece of old carpet. My stepfather had thrown away, and we used it to lay on. Didn't have no beds, didn't have no covers, but just lay back on it when whatever clothes you were wearing hunting that day. And I took my shoes off, still had my socks on because it was still cool. And earlier that evening, I'd been cleaning I'd been hunting with a .22 rifle, what my grandmother gave me years earlier. So I cleaned it, and I brought it back up there, and I laid it down beside me, and it was laid there beside me. And I was just about going to sleep when it sounded like a bomb went off. The whole building just boom. And we built this building, so you got to understand it wasn't the best building as far as foundation-wise. We didn't have that many nails, and what we had together, it had the holes. But anyway, the whole building rocked. And on the door to this thing, we actually had a door. It was an old door we found, but we had a door, hinges on it with a latch on one side and 2 hinges. Well, anyway, this whole building rocked, boom, and it literally scared me because I thought we'd been hit by a bomb. So it's about the time I raised up, like what in the world? The young boys down below, they screaming like crazy because it scared them to death. And I hear this voice hollering, "Where's that blankety blank night at?" Which is my last name. And I recognized the voice immediately. This was a fellow that I've never ran into. I'm 16-year-old. This fellow's about maybe 21 or 21-year-old. And I'm about 178. And he's about 260, 250, something like that. He's a big fella. And then I hear 2 other fellows, and I know who they are. There's 3 fellows on Mill Hill that's always had it in for me, and I hear 2 of them down there talking. And this other fellow, I don't know him personally, but I know I've heard of him, and he's just basically a big bully. I mean, that's what he is. Well, what they have done, they have kicked the whole front door off the hinges. One hinge is holding it on, the other's gone. The latch is tore completely loose from the door. The door's half hanging on. And he's standing down there talking to them young boys around the fire. He's telling them, "Where in the blankety blank is that night fella at? I've come down here, I'm going to whoop his butt. And when I get done, they're going to finish what I started." So you got to understand, these young boys, they're scared to death. But let me ask you something. If you was in your house and you were sitting there at a dark, and somebody kicked your front door in out of clear blue, you didn't know they was out there. They didn't announce themselves first. Just kicked your door slap off the hinges, and then come in threatening to going to pick you up and beat you half to death. What would you do? Now you ain't got a phone. You're down at your house. Like we didn't have a phone. What are you going to do? Are you going to stand and let the man beat you to death? Or are you going to try to defend yourself? And we're talking about a man that's way bigger than you are. Even though in a real fight, I had no doubt I could take the man. But it wasn't going to be just me and him. There's going to be 2 others climbing on my back at the same time. So I'm thinking, don't sound good. But what would you do if somebody broke in your house like that? Well, he's announced that he is going to just beat me to death. And I'm never bothered about it. I don't even know the man personally. But what it is, he's drunk, or pretty high anyway. Him and the other 2 fellows have been out drinking, and they have told this big bully that there's somebody down on that mill hill that he wasn't man enough to take down. And he didn't like hearing that. So here he come. He was going to find out who this fellow was, and he was going to show them that he could do it. Bad day. You don't come to him and knock a man's door down in the woods when he's deer hunting or squirrel hunting or any kind of hunting. Because generally when he's hunting, he's generally got something to hunt with. So when he started screaming he was going to beat this boy to death, the boy beside me had raised up and he said, Donnie, you hear that? I said, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I said, I got this well taken care of. And the boys down below, they're crying. Well, a couple of them, anyway, you could hear them. They're scared to death. And they tell him he's upstairs. Well, you got a trap door you have to raise to get in there. So I hear him boom, boom, come across the room, and up them stairs he starts coming. Well, when you come up, when you raise the thing up, the first thing that comes up is your head. Well, it just so happened that the way I was laying there, my head's over here, my feet's right here, and the trap door comes up like this. So my feet's only about that far from the trap door. So when he raised it up, he really could just grab me by the foot, pull me out if he knew I was there. But there's no light up there. All the light's downstairs. So when he raised that trap door up, he's looking straight ahead, and I'm off to the side. But I reached over and I picked that rifle up and it brought it right back over, and my big foot's laying there. I just laid it right down between the big toe and the other toe, and I had about that much of the barrel out the other side of it. Now he stuck his head up. He's looking like this, and that barrel is right there. Now I didn't say it's loaded, but I didn't say it wasn't either. But the main thing is he didn't know whether it's loaded or not. So when he's looking like this, when he turns his head like that, that barrel is about that far. And I mean, it's kind of hard to not miss something like that. When he turned his head, I just pushed that barrel right forward into the left nostril. And when I pushed it in there, I just pushed his head back. I never said a word. I just shoved his head back and the barrel up in his nostril. He couldn't get it out. And his head was up against the wall. And down below, all they could see was the body of that boy. And he just stopped. And they don't hear nothing. Nobody's doing anything. And he didn't go on up anymore. And they like, what's going on? And I'm just looking at him. And his eyes got big and bigger. And I said, his name, they had a nickname. I knew his nickname. And I never personally run into him, but I knew him. And I said, his nickname was Red. I said, Red, are you looking for me? And I'm still kind of laying down with my foot out in front of me with a barrel across my foot. And I got it stuck in his nose. And I said, are you looking for me? He don't answer me. He's trying to say something, but I guess he's just shocked. So I just pulled it back out about 2 inches from his face. And I said, are you looking for me, Red? And he said, we heard y'all was down here squirrel hunting. We just want to know what y'all doing. Y'all had any luck? And he was kind of getting sober real quick. He might have been drunk when he went up that ladder, but he was sobering up real quick. And I just looked at him and I said, I tell you what, Red, yeah, we've had a good day squirrel hunting. I said, you go back down that ladder and I'm coming right behind you and we'll talk about squirrel hunting. Now, I ain't stupid. I heard what he done. He done tore the door down, but he was kind of civil when he answered me. He didn't smart off. He didn't threaten nobody anymore. So he went back down, and his two buddies, they're standing at the door, blocking the door where I can't get out if I was trying to run it. So he comes back down, and what he done, he walked over there to them and turned around and just got in the corner and just stood there. And they looking at him like, what are you doing? What's going on? You know, you're supposed to pull him down and start beating him up. We're going to beat him up. So he don't say nothing. And I come down. I'm still in my socks. I don't have a shoe on. So I come down the steps. And the last thing I do when I come down is my right arm come down. It comes down with that rifle. And when I come down with the rifle, them two other boys, they go over there beside that fella. They all three standing there now. And I walked over there to the big potbelly stove. I sat down there, laid that rifle across my lap. I said, now, you want to hear about squirrel hunting? And big old Red said, yes, sir. We want to know how you doing. And, you know, he was real civil. And it seemed like to me he really wanted to learn. So I commenced talking. Because, you see, there's two things I do. I love to hunt. And if I ain't hunting, I really love to talk about it. And now I had 3 fellas that were just dying to hear what I had to say about squirrel hunting. And believe me, they got 20 minutes of all they wanted to hear about squirrel hunting. And 'cause we really had a good time that day. It was cold, but we had a good time. And by the end of that 20 minutes, they knew everything we'd done. Everything. So about 20 minutes into it, Red says, Miss Knight said, I tell you what, says, man, y'all had a good time. Said, we'd sure like to go with you one day, but it's getting late. We got to get home, but we'll talk to you again another day. We got time out there. Well, that's very nice of you, Red. I said, we'll see you around then. You may think this is crazy, but I never saw Red again. I mean, he lived about 4 or 5 miles from the mill hill. I knew where he lived, but I never run into him because he was much older than any of us. But I never saw him again. I mean, he was around, but he never come into on my hill, mill hill. I never walked into him in a building or anything. But now the other 2 boys, they were 2 of the threesomes that had been hounding me for years. And after that day, that night, they never once tried to intercept me or take me on or threaten me or make fun of me or anything. They left me alone, which was fine because I didn't hate them, but I don't like being bullied either. And so I guess 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years later, off and on, I run into these fellas different times on the streets, going in the building, whatever. Every time I run into them, you'd have thought it was my long lost brother. They would go out of their way to come over and shake my hand, talk to me, and just ask me what's going on. And I really think they like me. So it really turned out great because I never threatened them to start with. But they really finally, I guess, realized, there's a lot of things in life that's better to do than to mess with somebody that about every time you run into him, he's got a knife or gun or bow or something in his hands because that's all he does. He hunts and fish, So there is no downtime. And I was never had of them, but I wasn't the right person to be picking on. So bullies, I never did like them. I had a abnormal strength for my age. So they didn't really, I wasn't worried about me, but I don't like being bullied. And so knowing I could take them on if I had to, I deliberately didn't mess with them. And I guess that made them think that they could take me on. And then it come to a head eventually. And this is one time that it did come to a head, but it turned out pretty good. And I don't recommend guns to anybody for threatening somebody, but if somebody kicks your door in, come in there and threaten to beat you to death, if you ain't got a gun, a baseball bat or whatever, somebody's going to defend herself. And basically that's what I did, because them little boys down below, they was terrified. And I don't think the fellow was really going to bother them, but he scared the living daylights out of them anyway. But when he left there, they weren't scared of him no more. They knew he wasn't going to bother them or me, either one. So that's the end of that little story. And I've got one more I'll tell later. That's about another group of bullies that I run into in school for about 3 years. And it has a good ending too. But bullies, they're everywhere. People just, for some reason, to get it in their mind, they can run over somebody. And they're not really bad people a lot of times. They just going down the wrong track. And you straighten them out and everything works out. Anyway, into that story. Talk to you later about the other one.